Good evening, folks. Triple Crown here, coming to you from Vancouver, British Columbia. This is a round 10 summary, Operation Cool Summer, and what a round! What a round it was for the Japanese. It was a swing for the fences, and wow, it was a lot of dice rolling, and not what I expected. Let's should we get into it right away? Yeah, let's get into it right away. This was the result. This is what is surviving. These 4 bombers survived, 6 cruisers, 6 destroyers, and another couple aircraft that landed on the carrier that came down to catch them. And the Japanese also captured Dutch New Guinea. So the lesson here, and this is not an attack that I normally would have done, had the backs of the Japanese sort of not been against the wall and their hand was forced, because if the Americans had had one more turn to reinforce their naval position here off the coast of Dutch New Guinea, the Japanese would no longer have had, at least on paper, what I saw was even odds. The Japanese attacked here with 62 units, which included 3 kamikazes, and the combined Allied defense was 60 units total. And typically, when I experience this kind of a scenario where you're attacking and you're attacking with carriers and the defender is defending with carriers, they are an advantage because your planes, at the end of the day, if your navy is beside a territory that you control and your carriers are gone, your airplanes can land on that territory should the carriers sustain any damage. Where the Japanese, they had to go all in. They lost all of their 5 veteran fighters, and why they were successful, I guess, 2 main reasons. The first one was they attacked with, I believe they had 11 cruisers. So their cruisers, in comparison to the Allied Navy, they only had 4. So they were punching with a lot more weight there. And they also attacked with 12 submarines, and the Allies were defending a combined 11 subs. So the subs are attacking at a 4, and the defenders are defending at a 2. So the attackers are at an advantage there. And the Japanese, I guess 3 reasons. They're naval fighters, so they're naval fighters and naval torpedo bombers. They were rolling hits, but they were rolling 1s and 2s, which allowed them to target select. So they got rid of the Allied carriers and cruisers right away, and that really tilted the tide in the Japanese favor. Nobody really rolled well through went 4 rounds through 1s, 2, and 3. But when we did get it to round 3, the Japanese dice got hot, and the American and the Anzac dice were cold. So this is not a battle I would have done. And I typically saw, when I started playing BBR, when it comes to round 8 through 6, 7, and 8, you do these sort of last-ditch attacks. And surprisingly enough, they are more successful. So that is the lesson here. And this never would have happened had the Americans not realized that instead of going to Hawaii first when they're building naval units in San Francisco over here, they could have gone directly to the Marshall Islands. And from there, so they could have skipped a step in which they could have had an additional 6 destroyers in that battle. And that was a maybe crucial mistake for the Americans because they were wiped out. So what else happened? Well, all the aircraft that were not participating, that could not make it or reach the attack, they sank the American, because this is what also the Japanese are worried about, is if they attack the American fleet, well, all the American transports are all over the place with ground units, and also the Anzac fleet. Are those naval units and ground units now going to go attack the Japanese holdings along the mainland or other islands? So they had to make sure, in addition to taking out the Allied Navy here, they also had to sink all their transports, or as many as they could. Well, 1 transport survived. That was the American transport that shot down a Japanese plane, but I believe in total they must have sank 7 or 8 transports. which was huge. They also recaptured the Philippines, and they built a little bit of navy here because if they had lost that battle, if the battle had gone on the Allied side, the Japanese were worried about the Allies retaking the Philippines from the Carolines and from the Marshall Islands, which they were set up to do. So the Japanese had to take the Philippines with authority and have a counterattack navy here, and also a counterattack navy in case this navy got taken out, of a couple subs and a couple destroyers and a fighter they built here. So they didn't build many ground units last turn. They built basically navy. And surviving, the Japanese have 5 fighters total, 2 torpedo bombers, and 4 medium bombers. So the Japanese right now are in a good position, and I did not see this happening. The Americans, well, they responded in kind. They went to Wake Island and built a naval base. The Canadians here took, what island is this? Okinawa. So really that was just more for posturing and trying to whittle down the Japanese economy. So the Americans are set up to possibly take a poke at Tokyo next turn. So this is going to force the Japanese to back their navy up and replay a game of cat and mouse. As the American Navy repositions here in Hawaii, there's 2 battleships, 2 cruisers, and a carrier. And back home, they built a fully loaded carrier, a destroyer, and 2 more naval aircraft sitting in San Francisco. So that's huge there. The Japanese also now, their transports are safe, so they back them up to Siam, which is important because now the Japanese have a little bit of breathing room. They can now use their medium bombers to strike any of these Pacific islands to recapture them. Or they could go in a different direction completely and go take a poke at Calcutta, which is going to keep the FEC honest, because the FEC wanted to go into Burma and then maybe attack Siam. But if they did that, basically all these Japanese units would just jump on these transports and they would go do a landing here in Calcutta, which they saw coming, so they backed up. So even though the FEC retook Burma last turn, they had to protect their capital first. The British over here, there's a lot of action happening in the Middle East. The Germans took Syria with 22 units, including 15 tanks, which the British recaptured. And they lost about 14 units doing so. And the Americans reinforced Syria with 12 units of their own. And the Germans and the Italians are coming. The Germans are coming with too much stuff to count. Tanks, mechanized infantry, artillery, panzer grenadiers, and a swath of infantry is coming from the Caucasus and Stalingrad. So lots of action. The Italians now repositioned. They have 6 fast movers sitting in Bulgaria ready to go into Turkey next turn. And the Americans are trying to help out to save, at least get as many ground units as possible. They're coming around the southern point of Africa. They've got 2 transports, fully loaded transports that came across from Argentina. Those units are currently sitting in South Africa. And a Canadian transport brought 1 infantry, but it can grab more British units and bring them up to either to the Middle East. It can go over here to maybe towards Calcutta, or likely reinforce Cairo, because Cairo is going to be a dogfight to the end of the game. The Italians are rebuilding their navy. They built a battleship last turn. Well, why? Well, they want to get in this action here and help the Germans any way possible. The Germans did take Gibraltar next turn, which is an NO bonus for the Italians of a 3 because they control 3 of the 4 ports. And this combined American and Commonwealth Navy is all sitting off of Scotland here, safe. Dropped off a bunch of Americans last turn into Scotland and Liverpool, so they are safe. The Americans also back here built 3 destroyers, 2 transports, a tank, and 2 infantry to possibly, they were going to position them up on this sea zone at a naval base, but they decided to position them here in case they decide to maybe head towards Spain or Gibraltar, or maybe down here in South America where they're at a naval base and they can help reinforce the British over here in Cairo around South Africa. So we'll see what happens. The tide of the game may have now tilted in the Japanese favor. But the Germans last turn, if you're talking about strategic errors, they probably did put too many of their ground units in harm's way last turn. But they have more coming. So is this currently the Germans can send producing 12 units a turn that can come down here and attack Cairo, and currently the British can only build 6-8. So it's a game of attrition here, the battle for Cairo. Thankfully the Americans did reinforce with their 12 units, otherwise Cairo definitely would be lost, which is going to open up a bunch of other victory objectives for the Germans and Italians and possibly the Japanese. So lots of game left to be played. Can the Americans reinforce and get the edge in naval superiority, or is it lost? Do the Japanese now regain what they've lost in some of the money islands? Something else to note, the Japanese are sitting at a naval base here, and so this is going to prevent Anzac from building navy off the coast of Sydney. Instead, they have to build it off the coast of New Zealand, and they can only produce 1 unit a turn. The British can also build a unit, so that's why they built fighters last turn. Yeah, because the Japanese can come over here and wipe them out. So good for the Japanese for capturing Dutch New Guinea at a naval base, because they are in a position now to project their will on the Allies. So very interesting turn of events, and we'll see what happens going into round 11. Thanks for watching, folks.